Hey, also in the previous video, we went through just a quick overview of MCP, its internal workings and its theory. So we used JSON RPC, and then we saw how this all get connected together using the simple JSON RPC request response structure. In this particular video, we'll try to build an actual MCP server which will have a real life use case. For example, booking flight tickets. So the aim of this playlist was to implement an MCP server that will act as an agent to agent. So this is the use case which we'll be going through. We'll create a simple UI around it. We'll have all the necessary tools that we generally use while booking flight tickets. For example, holding on to a price and checking availability, checking date, checking time, and then booking tickets, getting response. So all those sort of things will automate it using our MCP. We'll use dummy data for now for like all the flight tickets, flight names, and flight prices. But later on, as we move forward in our playlist, we can integrate all those with our MCPs and then our backend database. Also, we'll be understanding how the three modes, that is stdio, SSE, and MCP, they are operate and how interoperable they are. So we'll go through that. We'll understand what each mode use case is like. So for example, if you want to host a server locally or globally, you can use /SSE. Or if you want the user to use its own resources to connect to your server, you can use /stdio mode. So we just go through it and then we'll see the use cases. We'll also Dockerize the code so that you don't have to do all the manual git pull stuff and then try to bring it up the server. You can simply pull the Docker file and then start your own container. So that would be one part. Also the agent part, which actually calls these tools, those will be implementing in the coming videos. So let's just work on creating this skeletal for our MCP server, and let's just get started. So let's just quickly go through the code. We have two types of client we'll be using for our use case streamable HTTP server. But just to show you how stdio mode works, I've also created an stdio client that will help us demonstrate its functionality. So let's just first go through the stdio mode. So let's just go to the server first, I think. So this is our simple MCP server. So for this, I have created around 11 tools are there, which will help us to simulate whatever we do during a flight booking. So all these tool details which can be seen in the UI also, I'll just go through a single tool. So we are using dummy data for now, but in the later on, what we can do is like we can have our own database like in MongoDB, and then we can try to connect with it, and then all this data will be coming from there. But for the purpose of this video, I have created a simple dummy data. So we have all the flight data, we have airport's name, and then some normal, dummy information dumped over here. So let's just see a simple tool. So mcp.tool, we have discussed already in the previous video that if you want to have certain endpoints which will act as a tool, you just have to use the decorator.tool. So there was one difference between tool and resource. So what tool does? Tool is suited for heavy computations, like for example, reading from database, writing to database, or like fetching an endpoint and then doing some calculations on that particular results. Wherever resources are, as far as are concerned, they are employed while some, like lifting very lightweight tasks. For example, reading a file and then sending that back to the client. So we have tools, resources, and prompts. All three is integrated over here. So this tool is pretty simple. So search flight takes some arguments from you, and then it will return you a list of dictionary, which will basically be a dict of all the available flights. So these things are important. We have discussed earlier also the description of the tool, the input parameters. So on the basis of these two and what output your tool is returning, the LLM will try to figure out which query can be solved by using which tools. So this is pretty much a basic tool definition only. It contains like all the dummy tools which we require during a flight booking. Let's just check a resource as well, how we are defining over here. So this is my resource. Let's just use, yeah, so airports. So what it does, it will give you all the available airports. So this is basically resources analogous to a GET request, what we do in a server, a client server model. So whenever you have certain tasks which does not require, calculative tasks which do not require more computations, we can always append it with a resource. Just for an analogy, we can take the tools as a post request, which will require a lot of parameters and a lot of calculations, and the resource we can get an analogy from the get request of HTTP. So this is pretty much it. Let's just see, so so this is the thing. The currently it's running in a streamable HTTP. That means it will spun a server, a UVCon type of server, which you can use as a client, server client model of request and response. For example, okay, let's just change it to stdio and then see how it works. So for both the mode will have different interaction of client. For example, if you're using an stdio mode, it what it does is basically if you see this particular client stdio.mcp, so here we have to pass this command to spin up that particular instance. So what MCP SDK or in any way what we do with stdio mode is that this particular Python file, this particular argument, this whole thing will be executed in a sub process, and then with that particular process your client can interact with. I mean it basically opens up a writer and a reader. So it takes an input from an input stream and then write it to an output stream. So you can get that data, you can pass that data to the server using input stream, and then you can read whatever response you're getting from the server using an output stream. So that's how stdio mode works. That's one simple difference between both of it. So for example, if you had an UVCon server, you have to provide the UVCon entire command line to run it up. For example, command would be UV, and then args you can simply say that app is equal to main colon app, and then hyphen hyphen reload. So something like that. You can also pass an environment file over here. So these all things goes, we'll see how these configurations work with integration with cursor or cloud in a later video. So this is pretty much it. So to list all the, so this is how you interact with an stdio mode. So you create a stdio client with the parameters whatever you have defined earlier. So it will give you a reader writer stream. So with using these reader writer stream, you can pass the input to the MCP server, and then you can get the output. For example, so I did an session.initialize. So all these things are getting dumped as a single file called session. So session are important. So this particular part will be having an a streamable HTTP as well. So you initialize a connection, and then you can list out the prompts, list out the resources, and then list out the tools. Now, if you have to call a tool, you can use this call tool method also. So what we do generally is that we list out all the tools, and then we give the our agent. For example, if you're using an open AI SDK, you just pass all these tools in the tool section, and then it's up to the LLM to figure out which tool it has to call with what arguments it needs to call that particular tool. So for if you want to do it manually, this is how we do it. We write the function name, I mean the tool name, whatever tool you want to call, and then the argument. So this is just a simple way to call the tool manually. Let's just run this. Um, I think it was base. Then activate. I can simply run the stdio mcp.py. So what it does, it ran that command python mcp server.py, and then it initialize the client, and then it's like listing out all the prompts, all the resources, and all the tools we are having on the server. So pretty simple way to use stdio. But for our case, we'll be using you know in streamable http. So let me just revert it back. Now what I can do, I don't need this. So just do. I already had a server running. I'll just delete it. I also had the front end running. I'll just delete it. So let me start the front end from here. Npm start. And then let's just also start the server. So now you can see that our UVCon server is running on localhost colon 8000. Now what we can have, just a thought is that you don't need, so if you're building a fast API server, not fast MCP, so you want certain routes that has to be that needs to be available to only MCP endpoints, and then certain normal routes as well, which you can simply call using Postman. So we can do that as well. I mean, you don't need to have a separate app running as in fast MCP and then a separate app running as a fast APS. So they both can be combined. And then we can distinguish between routing. So we can use star routes or star roulette as well for that. So we'll be demonstrating that as well, how it can be done. So for now, let's just go through the UI. So this is a simple UI. Now you have to connect, so you can provide any URL. So this slash MCP. So generally, what happens when you run an MCP server in streamable HTTP mode? So your server host, your port, and then slash MCP is appended. Like if you check out their SDK tool, so that's how they do the routing over there. So all the connection that follows a slash MCP will be going to our MCP. Now I can simply connect it, and then you can see that we have 11 tools listed over here. Search flight, get flight details. So these are all coming from the server only. Also, we have 3 resources, and then we have 4 prompts. So these all data, whatever server you are connecting to, this all data will be displayed on the left hand side over here. Now we can check one tool. For example, let's see this one. So this is a actual tool, and this is a JFK code. So dummy data only. So I can just execute this tool, and then you'll get all the result coming from that particular tool, just like an API call. So this is one functionality. Here is a chat interface. So this will come handy when we'll implement agent. You can talk to it, and then it will figure out that, okay, user want to know all the flight details. So I have to call this particular tool, and it will handle all the tool calling in this particular section. This is tool activity. This will show you which tool is currently getting called, what is the progress of the completion of the tool. For example, we mentioned about the notification. So notification will come out handy when we are implementing an actual server that takes some time to read from database or to write to database. So user needs to be shown some progress of what's happening in the background. So that all the notifications, all the progress bar will be shown over here. So this is just a simple UI built in React. So I think the only part that is left for us to look at is the MCP SDK API. So this is just a wrapper which I built so that it becomes easier for front end to call various tools. So list tools we have seen. Just let's quickly go through the call tool functionality. So it will receive a name and arguments from the, currently it's getting, like if you're manually calling, this will be fed from the UI, but if an agent is calling, so this all things will be provided by the agent. So it's pretty simple. We are using the client.call tool. So client is basically, we are initializing client over, yeah. So this is our client. So it basically connects over. Okay. So this is how it's connecting. So you are defining a transport. Transport is basically which type of mode it is using. So we have this something called streamable HTTP client transport in our MCP SDK library. It takes the URL, whatever URL you want to connect to it, and then client can connect to the transport. And then you can use the client to interact with that particular server. So pretty basic. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now, once more, we can just see the list resources. I mean, the call tool functionality. So I can use the client.call tool. I can pass the name and then argument. So these details, it's coming from UI for now, but when we'll add agent, so this all LLM will be calling. So yeah, this is the UI which we have, and then this is how you connect with the server, how you use stdio mode or how you use streamable HTTP. So for the next part of video, we'll be implementing agents. I think that's pretty much it for the next video. Okay, thanks.